Rob Slim Show.
Hey, it's Mike Brown.
Mike, how you doing, brother?
Pretty good.
Good. Mike Brown from Pleasing Terrors podcast.
Yeah.
Awesome. What is this a busy time of year for you, Mike?
It's a crazy time of year for me.
I was gonna say,
it's
I know.
Like Black Friday all month.
You do the haunted tours, correct?
Yeah, I do ghost tours in Charleston, South Carolina.
Wow. Is that all you do? I know you do the podcast, but do you do anything besides the tours? Is that like your full time?
No, I'm a full-time ghost storyteller.
That is so cool. So cool. How long did it take you to get to that point?
Well, I've been a tour guide for 22 years, and I've been giving ghost tours for 19 years.
Wow. It did not take long at all. That's very cool. Very cool. Wow. Nice. What is the favorite place of the tour that you show?
Well, my favorite, it's kind of weird to describe it as a favorite place because it's the creepiest place. but there is a particular graveyard that we go to that stuff keeps happening on the tour. Specifically, people keep passing out in the exact same spot on the tour.
Wow.
And it's
Do you warn them before they get there?
2013.
Do you warn them before they get to that point? Like,
oh, I tell them all about it.
And they're like, I'm fine. I'm not passing out. I'm not passing out.
What do you think causes that?
Well, it started in 2013. I went on a tour to that spot, and we stepped in front of this gate that enters into a graveyard. Excuse me. And
wow.
Excuse me. One of the ladies in the group just collapsed onto the sidewalk, and people in the group carried her across the street and set her down. And I just thought it was August, so I thought, it was just the heat. Right. But when she kind of regained her senses, she points at the gate to the graveyard, and she says, "What's in there?" And went on to explain that in the past she was sensitive to what she called spirits, and whatever she felt behind the gate was so powerful that it just overwhelmed her, and she almost passed out. Wow. And I just thought it was a weird, isolated incident because it had never happened before. It didn't happen again in 2013, and it didn't happen at all in 2014.
Okay.
And then in 2015, it happened 4 times.
Wow.
Weird. Wow.
There's
all in the same spot.
Something probably like really evil over in that graveyard, or like just crazy.
Well, in 2016, it happened 6 times.
Wow.
Again, all in the same spot. And so far this year, it's happened 4 times so far this year.
Wow, just in that spot. It would be creepy if it happened in a different spot. That's even creepier.
Yeah.
Even creepier. Wow.
Well, to make it even creepier, just this past July, they had this weird thing happen on the tour where I had a tour that went there. Nothing weird happened. Nobody fainted on the tour. But after it was over with, about an hour later, a family that had been on the tour contacted me. And they told me that someone had sent them a photograph that was taken on that ghost tour. And it's a photograph of me standing on that spot by the gate. And it looks like I'm just telling a story. But standing right sort of behind me, it looks like a woman is standing there. Only it's see-through.
What did she dress?
And they were really freaked out about it.
Wow.
Did they describe what era she was dressed like, or?
Well, I mean, you could see the woman. They sent me the photograph.
Yeah.
You could see. It just looks like someone almost like covered in, I don't know. I mean, I want to say a sheet or something, but you could see her face. So it's almost like robes or something.
Wow.
But the interesting thing about that graveyard is that if you go back. Going back years, there have been all kinds of incidents in and around that graveyard for probably 20 or 30 years now.
Is there anyone famous that's buried there?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mike. Is there anyone famous buried in that graveyard, or anybody notoriously famous?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there is. the people have had sightings of a woman in the graveyard. Back in the days when the graveyard would be open all the time and tourists could go in there, or when people would take shortcuts through there at night, they would talk about seeing a woman in a white dress inside the graveyard. And she would be there 1 minute and then she would be gone. And then they started locking the graveyard at night. And then this alleyway that leads from the street into the graveyard itself, sometimes we used to go in there even after they started locking the graveyard. And it's really dark at night. And one night I take my group down the alley, and I turn around talking, and I just happen to turn on my flashlight, and two ladies start screaming. And they said that there was a woman standing behind me. And the interesting thing about this particular graveyard is that there's a story attached to it that involves a young soldier that was stationed in Charleston in 1827, and his name was Edgar A. Perry. He was a sergeant in the U.S. Army, and he was 18, and he became romantically involved with a teenage girl who was a member of a very prominent, very wealthy family in Charleston called the Ravenel family. And the family did not like this guy because they wanted their daughter to marry somebody with money, and this guy didn't have anything, and so the family forbade them from seeing each other. And the two started sneaking around, and part of her family is buried in that graveyard, so they would meet in that graveyard. They would sneak away and meet each other there. And eventually they got caught, and the family members searched her room, and they probably looking for letters being written between the two of them. And they were shocked when they found out that she had a wedding dress hidden in her room. And they realized that these two were going to just run away and get married. Oh, wow. And so they basically confined her to the house, and they convinced the commanding officer of the soldier to confine him to the fort. And so the two couldn't see each other, and it's while they were separated that this girl got sick and died. And as her final request, she asked that she be buried in that particular graveyard, and she asked that she be buried wearing her wedding dress.
Wow.
And so over the weeks and months that followed that, the soldier would go there and, according to Charleston tradition, and visit her gravesite until eventually he left Charleston and he left the Army, and he left behind the fake name that he had enlisted under, Edgar A. Perry, and went back to using his real name, Edgar Allan Poe.
So that's
wow.
And they believe that this girl was the inspiration for his final poem, Annabel Lee. Her name was Annabel Lee Ravenel.
Wow. Oh my God.
So part of that is history, part of that is kind of local folklore, but that's the story that's attached to that particular place.
That's crazy.
No wonder he was a depressed life.
Yeah, that's kind of a reoccurring theme with him, is that these sort of tragic romances that end up with somebody dying.
Nevermore.
Wow. Mike, could you tell us a story for Halloween?
Well, another really creepy place here. If you guys ever come to Charleston, you can actually stay there. Is the Mills House Hotel, and a number of years ago, I came across a story about two ladies that were staying in the Mills House Hotel. It's this big hotel right in the middle of downtown Charleston, and it's a really old hotel. And they had gone out somewhere, and they were coming back to their room, and they're in the hallway out on their floor outside their room, and one of the ladies is messing around with their camera, and she ends up snapping a photo of nothing in particular. So they go inside the room, and she's looking through the pictures, and in one of the photos there's a man standing in the hallway, but there was no man there when they went by. And so they become convinced that the hotel is haunted.
Yeah.
So they decide to hold a seance in their hotel room to see if they can communicate with the ghost. And so they get a candle, and they light the candle, and I don't know what they say, but they're in the middle of the seance when someone starts knocking on the door of their room. And they get up and they go to the door and they open it and there's no one there. And so by then they're so freaked out that they say, this was a mistake. We should not be doing this. And they extinguish the candle. They get dressed. They go out to dinner. When they come back, the candle has been relit. And so they were really freaked out at that point.
Wow.
And that's just one of a lot of similar stories. I had a group on the tour a while back that came on the tour because one of the guys in their group, they were all staying at that hotel. And the night before, he woke up in the middle of the night, and there was a man sitting in a chair next to his bed watching him. And obviously he freaked out. And my first question was, what did the man look like? And he said he looked like a pilgrim or a Quaker or something. And there have been other sightings. It's almost always a man that's dressed in sort of that old colonial type clothing. Sometimes he's by himself. Sometimes he has a boy with him. But the interesting thing is, if you walk back behind the hotel, and there's a parking garage that sits immediately behind the hotel, and on one side of it, there's an old marker and an old fence that tell you that the parking garage and part of the hotel is built on what used to be an old Quaker graveyard that dates back to the late 1600s.
Jeez, that's crazy. Obviously, Charleston is pretty haunted, but besides there, what is the most haunted city that you've encountered?
Well, everywhere seems to have their plenty of ghost stories. A little over a year ago, I took a trip to New York City, and New York City always fascinated me because it's a city that has a lot of history, but you never hear about anything being haunted there.
Yeah,
and I was always kind of curious about that because I meet people from all over the world, and they all have stories about ghosts. They all know ghost stories from wherever they're from, but you never hear New Yorkers talk about it. No. And so when I went to New York, I went on a ghost tour there, and sure enough, there are just loads of haunted places in New York City.
Well, Amityville, that's one that pops to mind, which is kind of a true story, like almost, right? Isn't it based on?
On Long Island.
And it's like Son of Sam, but I've never heard of like any real haunted spots.
The Gettysburg is
Oh yeah, Gettysburg would probably be the most haunted place if I had to pick one.
My parents used to do like EVPs, like ghost hunting and whatnot. And
I forgot about that.
They definitely got like this. My dad went to this area where the soldier used to unload. There'd be prostitutes waiting for him and everything.
Yeah.
And they got this recording of this French woman saying, somehow, like, it said my dad's last name. It was like Gentile, or are you ever coming back? Like, in the recording. It was really fucking creepy.
Wow. Wow.
Ooh, that's... Yeah, EVP stuff really...
Yeah.
That really creeps me out.
Yeah, it's freaky.
And like you mentioned before, my pictures, I do have a picture. We were at my buddy Eric's house, just fucking drinking beers back in the day. And the TV wasn't on. And you can even see in the picture, it had one of those old cable boxes where you could see the light if it was on. And the light is not on, and there's a face on the fucking TV. I have the picture still. And my buddy, one of my buddies named Rob, saw the picture, and there's like these little like dots. And he's like, yeah, those are orbs. That's like some sort of a... He said something about like pictures that have a supernatural thing in them. They have orbs in them. They have these little dots of like bright light in them.
Mm.
Yeah, well, one of the things about having a job like this is people will often share their stories with me.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll even send me photos, and some of the things that they've sent me are really messed up. The worst one that anyone ever sent me was, I forget where she was from. It was a lady, she was a police officer, and she sent me a photo, and she mailed it to me, and it would look like it was a party in somebody's house, maybe in like the 70s or like late 70s, early 80s. But it's a bunch of people sitting around in a room, drinking, having a good time, nothing strange. But right in the middle of them is this transparent face that's all distorted, and it looks like it has a rope around its neck, and it looks like somebody is strangling right there in the middle of them. It was the most disturbing photo I've ever seen.
I was gonna ask if you owned any like artifacts, any haunted type artifacts.
No, I don't own anything that's haunted. I have a Ouija board. That's about as creepy of a thing as I possess. But I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to own anything like that. It's one thing to go out into a haunted place and talk about it and whatever, and then go home and not have anything to worry about. I don't know if I'd want to be bringing that stuff into my house.
Yes.
Oh, especially like in your line of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, that'd be just like lighting the beacon right there.
Talking about the Ouija board and everything, it makes me think of like some of those urban legends. And when I was
I would never mess with a Ouija board.
When I was a kid, and this one was real popular when I was young, was the Bloody Mary thing, and that still freaks me out. Like the thought, like I still a little scared to like turn the lights off in the bathroom and say Bloody Mary 3 times in the mirror. Like that one's weird. Yeah, like it has some kind of weird stigma to it.
Well, it's funny how that stuff gets ingrained into you when you're a kid, and you never let it go. And Bloody Mary is interesting because it's amazing to me how no matter how much everything else in the world changes, Bloody Mary faithfully gets passed down from generation to generation to generation.
It does. Yes, it does.
Kids today know exactly what Bloody Mary is all about.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the name of the town. There's in North Jersey, there's a town, Mike, there's still, when I lived up there, I've been there, there's like, in the middle of this town, this fucking tower, this like...
Is that the Devil's Tower?
Yes, that's the Devil's Tower. Yes. I was going to ask, have you heard of that? Like...
I've heard of it. I don't really know much about it, but yeah. New Jersey's like the, I don't know, epicenter of a lot of creepy stuff. All of the ghost stuff that you see on like TV and stuff now, all of that started with New Jersey.
Yeah.
And Weird New Jersey.
That's what I heard. It's like
all of that.
We were one of the first that embraced it.
The Batstone Mansion is definitely another site out in the like right out in the Pine Barrens out here off stage.
What's that one?
It's out in Wharton State Forest, and it's the main like entrance to the park there. There's like the office, but there's an old mansion from like colonial times.
Yeah.
And when my dad used to be the chief ranger there, he definitely heard stuff going on. Like he would hear like wailing and pounding on the walls.
Wow.
The servant bells, even though they haven't been connected to ropes for centuries, would start ringing by themselves.
Oh, wow.
Like all kinds of weird shit going on.
Well, if you get here in Charleston, like I live out in the suburbs, and then beyond where I live, you start to get into like the more rural areas, and there are some places I've gone out looking, because there are some old like dilapidated plantation houses and stuff. If you get out in those woods, and they have some really creepy stories. Like there was one I went looking for that's supposed to have like a cursed tree there. And I think New Jersey has a similar story about a cursed tree, too.
I think they have a cursed tree in, like, Tom's River.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the scary thing is when you get out there, it's not even, before you even get to, like, the ghost or the curse or any of that, some of the people that live out there, it's pretty freaking intimidating. Because they don't want you there, and they let you know they don't want you there. Yeah. And... you realize, because you reach a point like where you have to park your car and you just have to walk down like a dirt road, a mile or more, and you're just like, if this is getting way too horror movie like right here, and
yes,
but yeah, that there's some places like that here too, yeah.
We got a few around here, and there's one up north too, the Jackson Whites. Like,
oh yeah, the Jackson
Whites.
Whites.
Through there, like there's bullet holes and street signs. They will run you out of there.
The story behind them is they're supposed to be a mixture of like Indians, runaway slaves, and Hessian soldiers that deserted during the Revolutionary War, and they all just formed a community up in the the part of the New Jersey, where the Appalachians touch.
Yup.
Well, plus you have Clinton Road, which is probably the most famous haunted road in New Jersey, if not in the country.
I've heard of that Clinton Road.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of that.
I want to say, I don't remember off the top of my head, But I want to say it's one of those things where it was a place where once you had like bandits and stuff that would rob people as they were traveling, and there are a lot of ghost stories and stuff attached to that road. I think it's one of those really long, sort of dark, kind of rural roads, and if you're driving down it at night, you're pretty much all by yourself a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And you'll see some strange things coming out of the woods.
Like the Pine Barrens.
Yeah, the Pine Barrens is a lot like that, man.
That's a mess. Like 539, you ever drive out there, Slambo? Like no street lights in the middle of the night.
And stage roads like that, too, if you go down stage.
I remember when I was younger, I'd be driving through 539 at like 2 in the morning. I would just turn my headlights off just for a second. Just to see what it was like, and it's creepy. It's creepy as fuck to be on a road with no lights whatsoever.
Jersey Devil.
There's all those back roads and stuff too that are. That stage road, I think, right?
Yeah, stage road.
We have two right in Barnegat. We have the slave cemetery, and if you go in the woods, just like you talk about going in the woods, Mike, you'll find like old, rundown houses, but the house off. How many yards, I don't know, in the distance is like the slave house, because whenever there would be a home, like a plantation type thing, there would also be the slave quarters. Like they had the separate houses for that. You can't find that. You can find that out here pretty easily, like in the woods around here. But,
yeah, I mean that's you have a lot of that around here too.
Yeah.
That's and the stuff in the woods. If you're a haunted house in the middle of the city is, to me personally, a lot less scary than one that's way out by itself somewhere.
Yes, I've gone out with friends
you're
around
just
here.
Totally isolated.
Yeah, yes. Yup, you don't even know.
There's nowhere to run.
I've always been curious about the haunted house thing. Like, as a kid, no matter what street I lived on, there was always, like, this one house that everybody in town believed was haunted. I wonder what kids' fascination was with like deciding like, okay, this house, that's definitely haunted.
Well, there's one of the interesting things about ghost stories is the sort of the folklore is that you see patterns in it that sort of repeat all over the place. I can't tell you how many states have a crybaby bridge. Or a,
right.
A haunted tunnel, or a woman in white, ghosts. And it's interesting how you see those things repeated in different places, all across the country.
Yeah, that is true. That's crazy. Mike, what do you have planned for the next Pleasing Terrors? Can you tell us, or is it a secret?
Well, I'm. This past August, I went up and spent a weekend in Salem, Massachusetts, and so I've been doing. I'm in the middle of doing a 2-part episode right now on the podcast.
I heard the last
Salem
one.
Witch Trials.
I heard the last one. It was pretty amazing, pretty riveting.
I heard they do a big Halloween thing in Salem. Like it's like a big.
Well, I didn't know. You said too. There was like 2 Salems. There was like Salem's Village and Salem's Town. There was like two factions, and the village wanted to break off from the town and like just
they're fucking crazy.
Well, that's the funny thing too.
What's
the
that,
funny
Mike?
thing too is that like the Salem that we know of today is sort of. It's Salem, but it's not where all that stuff started.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did is we went out, and it was just this place to see where it all began. All the stuff that led to the Salem Witch Trials and 20 people being executed and all of that. And it's this neighborhood, and it looks like any other neighborhood. And you walk behind this house, and there's like this historic site hidden there, and it just. There's a plaque, and it's sort of like the foundations of where a house used to be. And it was just super creepy. There was nothing, nothing ghostly happened while we were there.
Yeah.
But it was just like one of those places you could just kind of feel it. That there was something wrong with it.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's crazy.
It was such a...
And it's in somebody's backyard.
Oh man!
It was such a useless like spilling of human blood,
That's what I was going to ask, Mike. What do you think caused it? Because I mean, smallpox was rampant at the time. There was also a war going on, right, between like the different French and
the English were
like, what was
going at it in the Spanish.
Like paranoia and disease, like, and just poverty, like not poverty, but like, I don't know.
I think it's just it's almost like a virus, but not like a physical virus, almost like a mental virus, like a psychic virus.
That's what I always thought of.
And it's this idea that they have of, at the time, of the devil, and that there's an invisible world, and that there's spirits all around them. And it's this, and it's really, if you think about it, I mean, it's kind of an idea that's been with human beings probably going back to the beginning. The idea, that there are spirits everywhere, and if you go even back to like the most primitive people, what was their solution when anything bad happens to them? Is they would practice human sacrifice. They would offer a sacrifice to the gods in the hopes that it would make everything better. And even though the Puritans would have been, horrified to think of it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially kind of what they did. Is they just allowed children to sort of pick people and say, oh, it's all their fault, and then they executed them, thinking that was going to solve their problems.
And they were,
of course, that didn't work.
They were like killing like dogs and cats and stuff in the whole thing too. It was it was just getting ridiculous after a while. Like,
wow.
Well, I mean, it's like neighbors testifying against neighbors, but there's like husbands testifying against wives.
I mean, there had to be a guy like, I'm sick of this broad. Get her out of here. I'm sick of this chick.
You also got to wonder.
She burned my dinner. She burned my fritters.
You also got to wonder if like the clergymen were like all corrupt. Like they saw a girl they liked.
I think so. Yeah.
Mike,
it's like a colonial purge, is what it was.
Mike, we have to wrap this up, but thank you so much. It's been a great time.
Thank you for having me again. I appreciate it.
No problem. Where can everybody find you?
You can find Pleasing Tears on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you'd go to listen to podcasts. And I'm also at Pleasing Tears on Facebook or Twitter or at pleasingtears.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem.